I am a therapist at the Family Center at the Krieger Institute, and part of my job is doing therapy with children, and I'm a supervisor there as well. And then part of my job is to come out and talk to people about self-care. I do presentations with caregivers and with professional people to talk about caring for yourself while you're caring for other people, and the importance of taking time to care for yourself. So for the next hour or so, I'm going to talk a little bit about what caregiver stress is, or compassion, and what compassion fatigue is. And then we're going to do some work on developing a self-care plan. Does anybody have an official self-care plan in place, a formal self-care plan in place? No. So I'm seeing heads shaking. Right. So before you leave today, we would like to do that. I'm going to give you an opportunity to formally write a self-care plan for yourselves, okay? Just by a show of hands, if you're willing to do it, you don't have to do it. But who here is living with or caring for a child with special needs? And then who is a professional working with kids with special needs?
I did it before briefly, but not very long.
Okay, great. Excellent. So seems like we have a combination. So I am going to be talking about self-care for professionals and self-care for caregivers, okay? I'm going to start off, if it's okay, giving a very brief commercial for my program, because Kennedy is enormous, as I'm sure most of you know. There's a billion different departments. So I'm with the Family Center. The Family Center is an outpatient mental health clinic, and we're located on the Fairmount campus, which is south of the main institute off of Broadway. We're kind of sandwiched between Fells Point and the Broadway buildings. And the Family Center is an outpatient mental health clinic, and we provide services for children from birth through age 18. Okay? Our focus is treating children who've experienced a trauma. So our staff is specially trained at providing trauma-informed services to children and their families. All right? I'm going to just define trauma for a second, because trauma means different things to different people. How we define trauma is anything that has happened to a person that makes it difficult for them to use their normal coping skills. All of a sudden, their normal coping skills are not helping them. Okay? So trauma could be some kind of abuse. It could be a separation from a caregiver. It can be grief. It could be a house fire. So we have a very broad definition of what trauma is. We have a staff of mental health professionals, therapists. We have psychiatry. Our psychiatrists are trained in prescribing medications related to trauma-specific symptoms. But we also work with kids who have anxiety and ADHD and a number of different diagnoses. We are able, under certain circumstances, to provide round-trip cab transportation free of charge to our participants within a 20-mile radius of our building. Okay. And just about 6 months ago, we started something called the Horizons Clinic. And the Horizons Clinic is a clinic that provides services to kids that are trauma-focused. The clinic is trauma-focused for kids who are either on the autism spectrum or maybe have a developmental delay, an intellectual disability, processing disorder, language disorder, or something of that nature. And our clinicians are trained in taking treatments that they've learned and adapting them for children with special needs. All right, enough of my commercial, okay? So I just wanted to start with this. Part of what we're going to talk about today is resilience and increasing our ability to be resilient to the negative impacts of stress, either caregiver stress or compassion fatigue. So I like this quote: "Just as despair can come to one only from other human beings, hope too can be given to one only by other human beings." The man who wrote this, Elie Wiesel, was a concentration camp survivor. He spent his childhood and his young adulthood in a concentration letter writer and a philosopher as well. So today what we're going to do, our objectives for today, is to increase awareness and get a better understanding of the signs and symptoms of caregiver stress. Okay? And in addition to that, compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue is, it's like caregiving stress for professionals. Okay, so we're going to kind of touch upon both of those things. And we're going to talk about the impact of caring for kids with special needs on different levels. Okay, on a professional level, on a cognitive level, intellectual level, a physical level as well. And then we're going to really try to focus on coping skills. And the second part of our hour is really going to be experiential. We're going to do some stuff. Okay, stuff that's easy, stuff that you can do in your car, you can do it anywhere. And it only takes a few minutes, and the goal is to, when you're under a lot of stress, that you can really quickly reduce your stress. Okay. So what I call caregiver stress is the physical and emotional exhaustion experienced by caregivers. Okay. And that could be caregivers who care for elderly people, people who are ill, kids with special needs, just general caregiving exhaustion. Okay. The thought that there's never enough hours in the day to do the things that you need to do to take care of the people that you love. And it's that kind of chronic stress and the toll that the chronic stress can take on your whole being, your whole person. Now, from a professional standpoint, it's the emotional impact of witnessing a child that you work with struggling or maybe experiencing traumatic situations, and how that professionally impacts you and how the toll that it takes on a professional. And the key to that is because professional helpers have an empathy or a caring towards their children, that it impacts them on a deeper level. So I want you to feel free to jump in and raise your hand and talk throughout this presentation. There will be time, like kind of at the end, that you can answer any questions that you have. If you have any questions for me that are kind of personal in nature and you would choose not to talk about it in front of the group, that's fine. I am available afterwards. And I want to encourage you, I brought some goodies in the back, not edible goodies, but we are going to get to that in a little bit. I have stress balls, I have clips, and I have different materials in the back. Feel free to take that. And if you need to get up and walk around and use the bathroom, feel free to do that as well. Okay. So what are some of the cognitive signs of caregiver stress or compassion fatigue, right? So cognitive means like, you know, how your brain is functioning, not the emotional part, but the kind of the cognitive part. Well, a lot of people will complain about lack of focus. They'll complain about difficulties prioritizing, difficulties remembering simple tasks, simple words. What day is it? What appointment do I have today? Oh no, that was Thursday. Wait, what day is it? So that kind of, those kinds of difficulties. So that kind of confusion or disorientation, okay? And not being able to shut it off. So how many people have had, who care for a child who has special needs, where there's so many things that you need to be doing throughout your day that you never really shut yourself off. You're always in high gear, right? Alerted to the next appointment you have, or I have to make sure everything is laid out a certain way before he or she comes home from school so that we don't start off badly, or it doesn't elicit some kind of strong response. So it's kind of never being able to shut it down, right? And the cognitive impact that has on people. So then recurring or intrusive thoughts. For those caregivers who have children who maybe are self-injurious or who have engaged in kind of dangerous behaviors as a result of their special needs. Mm-hmm. The fears that you have of that recurring again. The steps that you have to take to create safety in your home, that and always in the back of your mind that something could happen, or this time they could hurt themselves, or did I shut that off, or did I put that away, all right? So that's sense of heightened anxiety all the time. For professional people that are working with kids who have special needs or maybe who have experienced a trauma, it's the recurring thoughts about what the child has experienced and the fears that the child is not going to be able to be safe. Okay? I talk to a lot of professional helpers that say it's hard to turn it off at the end of the day because they care so much about their clients and they see the struggles and they hear of the potential difficulties a child is having, that it's hard to get that caring out of them when they go home. It's not really going home, it's your heart still is there. Yeah. Okay? Some caregivers experience guilt. That is there something I could be doing more than what I'm doing? I'm not an adequate caregiver for this child. Is there something I did that could have prevented my child from having the difficulties that my child is having? Okay. Now that's not those aren't rational. I'm not saying that they are rational. They're just commonplace. It's normal for people to have those thoughts sometimes. When it's really serious, you can have thoughts of self-harm, inadequate feelings to the point where you feel like harming yourself, or you have very, very serious depression. Right? Lack of concentration, so your attention span is limited. We talked a little bit about forgetfulness, perhaps. Being easily frustrated or irritable. Sometimes when I talk about this, I see a lot of people acknowledging the irritability. That, if you had a particularly difficult and challenging day, that's the thing that seems to be the quickest reaction is the irritability. So if you've had a difficult day and the first person that you kind of greet when you come home is the person that's going to get your wrath, right? Something like that. Has anybody ever experienced that? The irritability that doesn't want to shut off? Well, hopefully we'll talk a little bit later about coming up with tools to prevent that. So physiological signs of caregiver stress or compassion fatigue is that it has the tendency, like most stress, to exacerbate previous medical conditions. So if you're a person that has a tendency towards or a history of, or there's an illness or something that's in your family history, this kind of chronic caregiving stress can exacerbate that or can actually bring that to the surface. So people who may have hypertension, people that may have diabetes, stomach discomforts, things of that nature. Caregiving stress and compassion fatigue will increase your symptoms, and it'll make you, if you don't previously have symptoms, it makes you more vulnerable to develop things. Okay? That's without adequate stress management. Okay? Sleep difficulties, insomnia, nightmares, or that early morning sleep where you get up way before you need to and you can't quite fall back asleep, or you fall asleep fine but you get up in the middle of the night and you have some maybe racing thoughts. And some of those thoughts people have shared with me, caregivers will say, planning for the next day. Did I do everything that I need to do for tomorrow to be ready for things? Okay. Pain, some of it can be kind of unexpected pain. Neck, people will complain about kind of chronic shoulder, neck, back pain, places that we commonly hold our stress. And then it comes and goes, it flares up and it doesn't flare up. Some people will say that, I think I'm handling my stress pretty good. I don't feel like really badly about it, but for some reason I have this nagging back pain. Well, if you can rule out a medical issue that you don't have a herniated disc or something, that's probably stress. It's just not here. It's somewhere else in your body. Okay. Stomach problems and appetite changes. So you either eat way too much and you gain weight, or you don't feel good about the way you're eating, or some people just lose their appetite altogether. At my job, because we work with kids who have experienced trauma and we process their traumatic stories with them, it can be difficult for the therapists, and people tend to kind of eat a little bit too much to self-medicate some of that stress. So it's fairly common to see newer therapists gain a little bit of weight the first few months that they've worked there because of just the feeling that helps or stuffs down the emotions a little bit. Substance abuse. So maybe, the occasional glass of wine becomes the every night glass of wine becomes the every night bottle of wine. And then fatigue. And I don't mean the kind of I didn't sleep enough fatigue. I mean the real clinical fatigue, the exhaustion. I don't know if I could do it today. I don't know if I can get through the day today. This is, no matter how much I sleep, I'm still tired. I can't shake it. Has anyone had any of these things at any point? Any of these symptoms? Yeah.
The sleep.
That's a really, really common one. Especially, it seems like for women, the sleep thing is problematic when I do these trainings. It could be that men experience the same amount, but women tend to endorse the sleep problems a lot. Men might endorse the pain, but they have more like the unexplained pain, but women talk a lot about the sleep. Any questions so far? I'm pressing the button and it's not. Let me give it a second. All right, well, until that decides to catch up with me, I'll keep moving. So I want to talk a little bit about resilience and what resilience is. So now you know of all the signs and the symptoms, or at least I've touched on some of the signs and symptoms. I could probably do an 8-hour training on this. It's something that I'm really passionate about. We have 1 hour, so I know I might be kind of running through something, so I apologize in advance. But maybe I'll get a chance to come back and do a more in-depth thing at some point. But I want to talk a little bit about resilience, what it is, and how we can become more resilient in light of stress. Stacy?
Yes.
I'm stuck.
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. I've been pressing the buttons and I don't need it because everybody has a copy of it, but it kind of, those don't work for a little bit, but then eventually you keep trying and your coping skills kick in and you're able to kind of roll with it and move on, okay? I like the idea of resilience is rolling with it, and some people just seem naturally more resilient than others. Have you ever met a child or an adult who's been through a lot and just keeps getting up and doing it and is motivated and it's kind of incredible that things don't tend to bring some people down as much as others. So part of it is, I think, just personality composition, the ability to be resilient and bounce back. But that doesn't mean that we can't work on our resilience and build up our resilience. Okay? So resilient people tend to have certain characteristics in common. Right? One of those is wanting to seek healing. So something happens either out of the ordinary or just kind of chronic stress impacts them. And they want to get past it, and they believe that they can get past it, and they work to get past it, okay? Not everybody does that. Not everybody is either capable of doing it or wants to do it. Some people, it takes a lot longer to be motivated to make some changes, but resilient people tend to always be open for what can I do to feel better, what can I do to change my situation. The ability to be open and spontaneous. As caregivers, you know that sometimes you just have to roll with it, right? Things are not going your way, or today, for some reason, is a good day, and tomorrow might not be such a good day, but we're just going to take what we got and we're going to do something with it, right? Humor, finding humor in wherever you can find it. I know therapists that I work with, we tend to always try to make each other laugh and find some silver lining in a cloud and bring that up. And compassion. I'm sure it's hard sometimes when you've had a particularly stressful day to maintain your ability to be kind of generally compassionate. But resilient people tend to always be able to see the beautiful qualities in other people and focus on the good. Now, when they've done some research on resilient people, the two qualities that emerge most commonly is people engaged in some kind of spirituality, doesn't matter what it is, whatever that person feels is spiritual for them, and people that are willing to get support, seek out support, develop a support group. They don't try to do it all on their own. And, you know, when we talk about spirituality, I've done this presentation before. Spirituality is either, you know, it could be organized religion, it could be attending services. I had somebody say that they're not particularly religious, they don't practice a religion, but they get a sense of spirituality from nature, from being out and camping or taking hikes or things like that. So whatever your spirituality is, to try to seek comfort from that and use that in times of stress, or to always have it somehow in your life accessible. And then willingness to get support. Does anybody here have a kind of formal support or informal support network? Like family, friends, a group that you go to? Yeah?
Family.
Okay. Has anybody ever been in a kind of formal support group? You have? Did you find it helpful?
Yes, it was very helpful.
Was it something that was, oh, go on, go ahead.
Because if you get to hear different points of view, because when you're stuck in the center of this tornado you're in, and you get to, and the people in the group help get you out of that tornado with their different points of view, and then you see, and they bring up things like, oh, I never thought of that, or oh, it never occurred to me. And so it's really helpful to get different points of view from people who hear what you're, you know, who respond to what you just said.
And who have maybe common experiences, like there's some kind
Yes,
of commonality.
Some common, some had other issues, but it was good, because there are people from different walks of life, and it was great.
Now, was that something that was ongoing, or was it kind of time limited?
Yeah, I did it for, I think, 3 years. Yeah, and I just felt like I had graduated from the group at some point, because the issues I brought to the group have been resolved to a much higher degree that I felt like I was able to just, okay, now I'm okay to go it alone.
Was it easy to join up? I mean, in terms of your willingness to reach out?
It wasn't easy. And I had a little shove.
Sometimes it takes a shove, right? Definitely. So, when working with kids who have special needs or have some behaviors that are, you know, concerning or maybe self-injurious or things of that nature, anxiety can tend to be very heightened. One thing that can be helpful, I find, is to enhance resilience is to keep some kind of success journal, okay? Because there are successes every single day. Some of them might seem very small to somebody from the outside, but you know, when you're working with a child who is struggling, you notice the positive things. You notice the successes, even though somebody else from the outside world wouldn't see it as a success. Sometimes if you can record that in some way, you have that to refer back to when you're struggling yourself with some difficulties. Maybe you're feeling you had a bad day, you're not feeling quite as hopeful today about some things. You have that success journal to reference that, and it can get you like, okay, you know, you have these bad days, but then you have these beautiful things that happen. So many of our kids are just so resilient, and they're thriving. And sometimes when we're, you know, in the middle of it, we don't see that, but over time we can look back and see the progress or see things. To try to take a couple minutes to focus on your child's ability to thrive, you know, that they are doing the things that they're doing that maybe they weren't doing 3 months ago or 6 months ago, or, you know, to take stock in your child's ability to survive and to thrive. We're gonna do the self-care stuff later. Everybody has different things that help them with self-care, and I'd love to hear some of your thoughts if you do have anything that you do that works, because I think the most important thing about some of these trainings that I do is what other people share with each other about things that they fit into their day, even though they're having maybe a hectic day or a busy day, things that they fit in, that helps. So we're gonna take a little bit of time in a minute to talk about that. You had mentioned the group, maintaining some kind of connections. Sometimes all it takes is a support group of 2 people, 2 or 3 people. You go to one says, I can't do it, I'm having that same kind of issue myself, and I don't have it to give today. My sponge is full, you've got somebody else to go to. And sometimes it could be that you have to make some kind of formal arrangement with a couple people. So say you know a couple other caregivers through groups that you've been in, or your child's school or something, that you say, you know, sometimes I'm struggling with taking care of myself and some of my stress. If I can go to you, I promise that you can come to me. And so you create almost like a contract with somebody that you can provide some kind of support. It doesn't have to be your best friend. Sometimes best friends are almost too close to the situation to be able to be really helpful. Sometimes it takes somebody who's a little bit more objective, who knows some of the stresses but isn't so personally connected to you. So it might be possible to reach out to a couple people and say, you know, I'll be there for you if you're there for me, and make it kind of a formal arrangement. Right? If there isn't such a thing as a support group and you know, the everyday activities that you're doing right now with your kids. Monitoring your exposure to stress in the media. So I'm not saying don't watch the news. I mean, it's good to be informed. But nowadays it seems like in order to tell a story, a lot of the media outlets feel like they need to repeat over and over and over again, to show those same video clips of people running from the Columbia Mall, to the point where it's anxiety producing, or for some people it's numbing, and they tune out, and it's not numbing in a good way, it's numbing in a way where you become more emotionally distant from situations. So while it's good to be informed, it's not always good to be informed when you don't feel like you could do it. If you're feeling today, this is really not the day for me to be you know, watching CNN about that situation, give yourself permission not to do it. We're so bombarded with so much information that our minds never really have a chance to rest. And when you're caring for a child with special needs, or you work with a child with special needs, you're already living a lot of stress potentially, or you have a lot of appointments to go to, or your day is kind of packed. So if you can limit your exposure, it's going to kind of almost naturally reduce some of that anxiety that you have. So I think sometimes good caregivers have such unrealistic expectations of themselves and set the bar so high for themselves that people can tend to never feel like you've met your goals. So one thing that can be helpful is to set kind of attainable goals for yourself every day or every week, if you prefer to do it like that. That you don't do the 20 errands on your list, or you don't make the 20 follow-up phone calls that you need to make on behalf of your child today, that you try to do 2 of those things. Or, you know, I can't make the cupcakes for the class. I don't have time, but I can buy some cupcakes. So set the bar a little bit lower for yourself, because when you attain your goals, you're going to have a boost in confidence. You're going to feel better about yourself. But when you're constantly trying to catch up because your expectations of yourself are so high, you're never going to live up to your expectations. And that really takes a toll on people, especially on caregivers. We already talked about being flexible, and part of being a caregiver, being a parent, is just kind of having to be flexible sometimes. Sometimes, you know, with kids who are on the spectrum, it's hard to be flexible at least it's hard for them to be flexible, so you try to be so ordered and everything, you don't want to stray too much from the schedule with them because that can really throw them off or create more difficulties. But in terms of yourself and the things that you need to do, that you try to allow yourself some flexibility. And the big one is to figure out what you can control and what you can't control. So why I want to talk a little bit about control is that feeling out of control creates anxiety and depression. Just about the number one source of anxiety and depression is feeling like you don't have any control. We live in a world where there's a lot of things we don't have control over, and a lot of really big and scary things that happen. And I think as caregivers, we tend to hold on to a lot of hopes that we can control things that will happen with our children. But we can't. But it's hard sometimes to determine what can I control and what I can't control. So primary control is what you literally can control. You can control what you feed your child for breakfast. You've got options, you pick something, you fix it, you give it to your child. You can't control if your child eats it or not. As much as we would like to try to control that, we can't control it. We can't control the snow we're about to have, right? I mean, it's coming, we don't know how much it is. We can do what we can do to get food in the house and cancel appointments that we need to cancel, but we don't have any control over that. That's primary control. Secondary control is how we choose to deal with the fact that we don't have control over something, okay? So control what you can, and then figure out how to live with the stuff that you can't control, all right? So, like I said before, we can't control the snow, but maybe you went to the grocery store and you got extra milk, or maybe you have a snow day activity scheduled tomorrow, or those are the things that you can control. And that can be really hard. I talk to caregivers sometimes and they're like, but I can do something more. I should have done something more. So it's hard to really stop yourself and say, seriously, could I have done anything differently? I really couldn't have. And to allow that to go and take control of the things that you can. Okay? So now we're going to talk about self-care and what do you do to take care of yourself. Earlier I asked people if they had a formal self-care plan, and no one said yes. Do you have a formal self-care plan by any chance? No. Okay. So it's unanimous. Nobody has a formal self-care. Okay, well we're going to change that hopefully. What do people do to take care of themselves? Feel free to raise your hand if you want. If you don't want to, that's fine. But does anybody have anything that they do?
Eat right.
Eat right? Mm-hmm.
Exercise. Make sure you get good sleep. Sometimes we don't, but most do. Trying to think about too much things at once. Stress out yourself.
Certainly all that you said already, and then if you can have at least one activity that you do for yourself, maybe on a weekly basis or something. I mean, simple. It's simple to think about, but then it just doesn't always happen because you just don't have control all the time. So I know one thing that I'm trying to get back to. My daughter's 30 now, and I'm trying to get back to singing. I've always enjoyed singing, but it got to the point that I could no longer participate with my choir, my church choir, just because it was rough. I just, you know, you try to schedule this and schedule something, but then if your child just doesn't get with it at that time, that's something that you can't do. And, you know, if that's one of your outlets, you know, so you try to find at least one thing that you know you enjoy, and whatever, I'm going to try and do this. So just whatever that might be to any individual.
That's so true. That's really true.
Yeah.
Some people shop when they're stressed out.
And then they get the bills and then
That's
that's
right. Yeah, at the end of the day.
That's right. True. I've heard that
I
quite
can
a bit.
control my
suffer-
shopping. I usually window shop. Or if I'm stressed a little bit, I go to the mall, I look around, whatever. If I choose to buy, because I could control my shopping. If I choose to buy something, I buy it. If not, then I don't. But I like going out if I'm stressed.
Being out and about.
Yeah.
Different change of environment, change of scenery.
I have an art room. I don't get to spend as much time in there as I would like, but when I can steal a moment, I'll go in there and create something. I've been trying to get started on a quilt, but that hasn't started yet, but I do paper arts. I make cards, I scrapbook. I've had this desire to write and illustrate a children's book. But whatever little thing I can do in there, even if all I do is make one card for somebody, I feel like I've done something for myself. And I always keep a book next to my bed so I can read something, so I can just kind of disappear out of my life and into this book. And it kind of gives me a little mini vacation before I go to sleep.
That's important too, because you're changing your mind's focus for a little bit, you know, because if you fall asleep with usually you fall asleep with the last thing that you thought about, right? The last thing that you did. And that's why a lot of sleep professionals will say, don't watch the news before you go to bed, because then you're going to bed with all of that stuff. But if you fall asleep to a book that you're enjoying, or you fall asleep to a song that you love or something like that, your brain tends to follow that kind of pattern into sleep. Anybody else?
I would like to meditate, but don't do it often as I would like. But that's something that I find to be really helpful, especially during periods with lots of stress.
We're going to do something kind of like meditation in a minute. So hopefully you'll enjoy that. So when scientists have done research into stress relief, the number one thing that comes up is that aerobic exercise is the most helpful in reducing stress. And that's just a few minutes of physical activity that raises your heart rate. So it doesn't have to be, a spin class an hour a day. It could be 15 minutes of some kind of physical activity that elevates your heart rate. So it could be that you went to an IEP meeting, you're really ticked off at what happened in the IEP meeting, and you go home and you take the steps in your house, up and down the basement steps for 10 minutes, okay? That's enough to get your heartbeat going, all right? A walk around the block, where you park your car far away from the grocery store, and the farthest point that you can get, and you go grocery shopping, and then you have to push your heavy cart all the way back. Might not be 15 minutes, but between getting there to the store and getting back, you might piece together 10 minutes or so. So anything you could do to just add a little bit of heart-pounding exercise in your day. And like I said, some people get so stressed out, like, I can't go to the gym today, I have too much to do. Well, then don't go to the gym. Give yourself permission not to go to the gym. Because by being upset with yourself about not going to the gym, you're just increasing your anxiety and you're making yourself feel worse. Give yourself permission to put in a yoga DVD and to do 10 minutes of a yoga DVD, something like that. So that's the number one thing. And like I said, it only takes maybe 3 times a week. But also that 5 minutes, if I have a particularly emotional therapy session, a lot of difficult content, I may run up and down the steps a couple times, not run, but I may quickly walk up and down the steps of my building a couple times in between sessions. And that's just enough to kind of shake your chemistry up a little bit and put you in a different place. Almost like jump starting you a little bit, so you're not stuck. So now we're going to do something fun. We're going to talk about mindfulness, and then we're going to practice it. So mindfulness is very simple, but it's very difficult at the same time. So mindfulness is training yourself to be in the here and now. How many times a day are you thinking about the next thing that you have to do? You know, whether you're caring for a child or caring for someone with special needs, or you're not. We live in a world where everybody's kind of not engaged in right now, always looking to the next thing, always checking their phones, always, things like that. So mindfulness is trying to train your brain to tune everything out and to just be present, right? And a lot of times it means engaging your senses to be able to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to engage all of our senses. It's going to take us like 5 minutes, and it's something that we might be able to do at home. I encourage you, if you see trainings in the community or you hear about maybe the Y might offer a class or something in mindfulness. Mindfulness is a sort of meditation, okay? So I'm going to pass this around, and this is chocolate, these are mints. Does anybody have a preference for mints? You would rather a mint? Okay. Everybody else is okay with chocolate? Okay. There you go. Now, take one, or you can have more than one, but don't eat it yet. Okay? Oh, she's going to pass. I can help you pass that back. There you go. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
We're going to engage in mindful eating. How often do you eat so quickly that when you're done, you barely tasted what you ate? One thing about Thanksgiving, I think, is that not always, depends on who you're having Thanksgiving with, I guess. But Thanksgiving can be a more formal meal where we take more time and you have a chance to enjoy your food more, right? Because you're actually carving out some time for that meal. So I think a lot of times we eat so quickly that we don't enjoy, and then maybe we're eating things that might not be healthy for our bodies, and we're doing it so quickly that we won't enjoy it. So then what's the point of having a Big Mac if you're not going to enjoy it? And if it's not that healthy for you? Eat your Big Mac, but enjoy it. Mm-hmm. Take time to enjoy it, right? Mm-hmm. So, okay. We're going to slow your brain and body down and experience eating candy in a different kind of way right now, okay? So I'm going to read you instructions, and we're going to eat it extremely slowly. So wait for the next prompt before you engage in the next thing, all right? Mindfulness is a way to kind of learn how to reduce your anxiety quickly. So what I'd like you to start off with is just to slowly unwrap your candy. And pay attention to the way it sounds as you're unwrapping it. Just hold it in your hand when you're done. So now I want you to put your candy candy up to your nose and close your eyes and just smell it. Right. Notice how your body's reacting to the smell. Is anybody having changes in their mouth? Are they feeling excited, eager? Just pay attention to those things. All right. Now put the candy in your mouth and keep your eyes closed, but don't chew it. If you're having any other thoughts going through your head, put them away and just think about the candy in your mouth. I want you to pay attention to the texture. If it's melting, if the temperature is changing, if your mouth is reacting to what you just put inside of it, and how your mouth is reacting to it. Okay, no. You can begin chewing, but do it very slowly. Just noticing your jaw movements, and if there's any additional sensations that you're feeling as you chew. Try not to swallow it right away. And if you're not trying to swallow, pay attention to how the chocolate may be or the candy might be going down your throat without you trying. All right, as you start to swallow, try to follow the candy through your throat and down into your stomach. Try and visualize that. When you swallow it, take a deep breath. Exhale and open your eyes. So how did it taste?
Good.
Did it taste different? Or did you notice anything different about it?
I started to pay attention with how it was melting, because I didn't chew it, I let it melt. And I paid attention to how the mouth filled up with water while it was melting. And I was trying to imagine it going down my throat. So I'm picturing it going down, actually going down my throat. So calming kind of feeling.
Was it, did anybody have thoughts creeping in and you had to push
Thoughts
them
were
away?
trying to creep in, yes.
Yeah, okay.
So I noticed, that, okay, I'm sitting here, I'm not doing anything else. I'm just enjoying this candy. And to mindfully, just make that task to just not think about anything else except this candy. So it's like a disconnect from everything else, because I'm just focusing on enjoying this candy. And I don't sit still long enough to do that, there's always something else. So, I guess I'm getting the technique of, just making the time, making that effort to just enjoy the candy and then think about where I have to run off to when I leave here, So it was a moment of relaxing.
Is it something that you think you could do when you're not in this room? That you might try at home or in your car? Or?
I've tried, I've heard of mindfulness. It is something that I've tried. If you can make that concerted effort to not think about anything else. One thing that I looked it up and I experienced muscle, progressive muscle something mindfulness. And so that's helpful. I mean, that's just a concerted effort to just sit down and not think about anything else and just, contract your muscles from your feet and then work your way up. And just concentrate on doing that to relax and, and then that takes a few minutes in the morning or whenever you do it. So I can see, I guess with our crazy lives, kind of how they can get any real effort to just take like a minute or 5 minutes to just really try and relax and not stress your mind. It's helpful. It's helpful.
And it doesn't always come natural. It's something that you have to work on and you have to train yourself to do. You know? I mean, first time I ever did this, I thought I had probably never eaten anything as slowly as that. Probably had a million pieces of candy in my life or chocolate in my life and never done it slowly like that, And so it's about kind of training yourself not to pop it in and chew it up and be done with it in a second, but to take that moment. If you're going to eat candy anyway, enjoy it and be there in the present moment. And you mentioned progressive muscle relaxation. I wasn't planning on doing it, but I think that's a really good point. I am going to do one quick thing with that in a minute. Any other thoughts about mindfulness? You can do mindfulness in your car after a meeting. You can do mindfulness right before bed. You can do mindfulness anywhere and nobody knows that you're doing it, which is kind of cool. You can be around people and do it, and you can be in your zone and no one has to know anything about it. So next thing we're going to do is something I think is kind of fun. We're going to do some visualization. So I'm going to hand this out, and this is yours to keep. It's a beautiful field of lavender that is growing right near the ocean. Okay, you can see the ocean kind of in the distance. So lavender has medicinal properties. Lavender has been studied and shown to have an impact on your nervous system and to literally calm you. I would recommend, if you don't already have a lavender candle or lavender oils or something like that you go out and get yourself some. Natural lavender works better than synthetic or fake lavender stuff. But this is a field of lavender, and I don't have any actual lavender for you to smell now, but it's pretty readily accessible. I found online a place, I think it was on Amazon, where you can buy lavender sachets, like 10 of them in a pack, and they're really, really cheap. I think it's like $8 for 10. And those are, with the kids that you work with or the kids that you live with or care for, it could be an activity that you and your child do together where you smell lavender and you try to get yourself into a pretty place, like maybe that place or maybe a place of your choosing. I found that on Google Images. So you guys can, go and look on Google Images and find some place that really is more to your liking. If you like fall leaves or mountains or a beach in Jamaica or someplace, they've got everything that you can imagine on there. So I'm about to put something on, and you don't have to close your eyes, but I'm going to just play it for a few minutes. And I want you to pay attention to your breathing and try and take nice, steady breaths. We don't use enough of our lung capacity. We usually do shallow breathing on a day-to-day basis. But by increasing our oxygen flow, it has a pretty immediate impact on anxiety and stress. So pay attention to your breathing. And like I said, you can close your eyes or you don't have to close your eyes. But try to imagine yourself in that picture. Okay? Can you hear this?
Just thinking about it, I'm almost fell asleep twice.
Wow, that's great. That's good.
Very soothing.
So, were you able to block out some things, thoughts that might have been creeping in? You start to.
Oh, I could actually feel a breeze in my face and bugs chirping.
Wow, that's great.
Like I was standing there listening to the waves and smelling the lavender.
Oh, that's great. So, anybody else want to share anything? Did anybody really struggle with it and didn't like it? Couldn't get themselves into a place? Because some people have a hard time. Like, you ever tried to get hypnotized? And some people just can't do it because they can't ever get to the state where they kind of let go enough. Did anybody have difficulties with that?
I was just thinking about, to have a group, you know, ladies come over and, okay, everybody, just go to sit. You know, we're gonna look at great pictures or something and just have the wind go and then have some lavender scent somewhere. And people could actually do that for like, I don't know, 15, half an hour. I don't know what it might do.
So you have supported
you know,
people around you
chill
and then.
like that for a period of time. It'd be helpful.
They, I think it was CVS, years ago used to have this stuff. It was in a white bottle with a green label, and it was lavender bath salts. I haven't seen it there in a long time, but, you know, you'd only need like a couple tablespoons in a tub, and you could, it just filled the entire bathroom with this beautiful lavender scent. And the impact of even the hot water with the lavender on your muscles was incredible. So I don't know if it, like on drugstore.com or one of those, like on a website, it's probably easier to find it online than to go into a million stores, but that might be something to look into too, because you can get one of these CDs. I got mine at Walmart in the candle section, but somebody told me you can get them at Family Dollar, and sometimes they have them at the dollar store. But all different kinds, not just waves. So if waves aren't your thing, you might like leaves rustling, or you can get, sometimes you can get these CDs that have a few minutes of a few different things. And if you really enjoy that, you can burn a copy and keep it in your car. So from the time that you leave one appointment until you get to the next appointment, you might be able to kind of listen to it and get you know, some of your stress out a little bit. So I use this a lot working with the kids that I work with too, and they get totally into it. And they come up with all these scenarios of the way the sun feels on their skin, and it's really cute. They really kind of can wrap their heads around it.
Yeah, there are free apps that you can get on your phone that have those sounds. Also, Trader Joe's sells the bath salts around.
Oh, do they? Oh, okay. Is it in like the little packets?
It's in
Or
a
like
tub.
A tub?
Yeah.
Oh, good, all right. Excellent. All right, so, you know, just mentioning the deep breathing, that's kind of one reason why people can get into this exercise, is the combination of the sound, the visual, if you had some lavender, the smell, but also regulating your breathing. And regulating your breathing is something you could do at any time. If you're in a stressful meeting or a stressful doctor's appointment, or your child is having a tantrum or something, even though it's not automatic, you could get yourself to regulate your breathing by taking some nice deep breaths and controlling your oxygen intake. So I want to do one more thing before we wrap up. These are just some other ideas. Oh, one thing I do have to say, which is really helpful sometimes too, is music is always beneficial to relieving stress. One thing that can be not really time consuming, but it can be really helpful, is making yourself a playlist or burning yourself a CD of songs that you've loved throughout your life that get you to a certain place. So your favorite song in high school, or you know, when your girlfriends all get together, you play some tunes that you love. Making yourself a playlist of your favorites and having that playlist in your car, or having that playlist by your bedside table. So the songs that get you moving, or it doesn't really even have to get you moving, it gets you calm or whatever. And having that accessible for those times where you need kind of instantaneous release. So you could play it as loud or as quiet as you want in your car when you're going from point A to point B. And that can be really helpful because it can bring you back to a place in your life that was really helpful or maybe less stressful as well. Okay? Developing a support group, I know it's difficult, but sometimes there are things, if you search online, there are already established support groups that are willing to take new members or things like that, and it's hard to put yourself out there. But sometimes you can drop in and see what you think, and you don't even have to say a word, but if you like it, you can try and start to make connections with people in that group. We did meditation already, and we talked about a success journal. There could be a success journal for your child, Or you can write a personal success journal of things that you think you did well, but focus on the things that you did well. Don't write, but I could have done this one better. I did this great today, but I could have done this better. Just positivity in there. And then going into your own therapy, having your own therapist. Somebody that's totally there just for you. You know, that you don't have to share with anybody else. So then the last thing is, we talked about some of this stuff, but I do want to give you one more thing. So progressive muscle relaxation. I do something with the kids that I work with, and I'm going to do it with you now, and I'll try not to, what I do is I talk about making lemonade. So I'll kind of use the same analogy with you guys, but I hope you don't think I'm talking down to you or patronizing you. It's just something that I do with the kids that I work with. And it might be something that you could do with your own children. That's kind of fun. So what I want you to do is put your feet flat on the floor. And if you would hold your hands palm up. And I'm going to pretend to put half of a lemon in each of your hands. Okay, a cut lemon. I'm going to walk you through this, but the goal is to squeeze as much juice out of the lemon as possible. Because you're making a pitcher of lemonade, and you need as much of the juice as possible. In order to get as much of the juice out of those lemons as possible, you have to squeeze as hard as you can. Now, if you have long fingernails or rings that could hurt you, I advise that you try to, keep those things away from the palm because I'm going to ask you to squeeze really hard. Right? Close your eyes, watch your breathing, and squeeze as hard as you can until I tell you to stop. Okay, ready? On your mark, get set, go. As hard as you can, get all the juice out. You gotta fill up the pitcher. It's okay if you shake. Okay, you can release it. Now I want you to pay attention to the sensations in your body. And if you're having any sensations. Does anybody feel anything? Anybody have any tingling?
Yeah, sense of energy there.
Does anybody feel anything in your neck or shoulders?
Feels more relaxed.
So our muscles tend to be, when we're under stress, constricted. What this does is it's supposed to, by squeezing and then releasing, it's supposed to work on elongating your muscles a little bit. And it might not feel like it, but it worked from your neck down through your arms. Okay? The harder you do it, the more sensation you're going to feel. This is something that you can do anytime. If you have you can have your hands behind your back if you really don't want people to see what you're doing. I've had kids say, well, what if people think I'm getting ready to punch them out? Well, you could put your hands in your desk, and you could put your hands behind your back. But it's something that in the moment can really relieve stress, like if you're feeling like you're about to lose control or something like that, or So it's another example of something quick, like the mindfulness or the visualization, where you don't need to be in a soothing environment. You could be someplace that's stressful, but you're controlling your body. Okay, you're taking control of your body. There's other things too with progressive muscle relaxation, but this is just something kind of short and sweet that we can use. So I know when you're caring for kids with special needs, you probably don't have a lot of time to take care of yourself or to take an hour-long hot bath or go get a massage or do whatever, but if you don't make self-care a priority in your life, nobody's going to do it for you. Very rarely do we hear people say, you need to take a break. and I've got this for 2 hours, go and do something for yourself. If you have that situation, that's great. But a lot of times we don't have somebody that can back us up and can provide that kind of support. So if you don't do it for yourself, nobody's going to do it for you. So I want to challenge you just for a minute. You don't have to do it here, but if you're already sitting here and you're not in a rush to go do something else, you might use this time to write yourself a formal self-care plan. Using anything that you already use that works for you, using things that maybe you'd like to try, maybe things you learned today, things you learned from other people here today. And by signing it and dating it, it's like you're making a commitment to it. It's almost like a contract with yourself that you're going to try. And if you don't do it, don't beat yourself up over it. As we were talking about before, is we put so much stress on ourselves sometimes that we just create more anxiety. It's kind of a contract, but be forgiving of yourself if you're not always able